Right, good to see everybody. Today we're going to be going over our Series 3 push assessments, which are going to be over the next 3 months, finishing out in our peak phase, of course. But to get started, we got our base phase. So today we're going to be working through our weighted lunges and our overhead press. Those are going to be the two assessments. They are not listed in the tracking section of the app quite yet for the series. So we're going to go through a lot of the variations today as well, just so that we're fully prepared. And of course, because a lot of the variations are going to be seen throughout the whole series and are going to support the weight that people can push when it comes to that peak phase. So without further ado, we're going to get into it with our lunges. What is the main mover? What are the main muscle movers of this movement?
Quads.
Beautiful. Quads. What else we got?
Quads and glutes.
Excellent, exactly. So the quads, glutes, and then of course we have our synergists. Those are the muscles that are supporting this movement, but are not the main movers. Does anyone want to shout some out? What are those leg muscles?
Core.
Beautiful. Core always 100%. What else we got? Let's think about like maybe some of those inner thigh muscles, right? Adductors, magnus, longus, brevis. Got those outer thighs, right? Vasty group. Those are the main movers. We'll have some calf engagement, right? That's going to have our ankle stability. Now, could anyone just cue me through a lunge? Let's say we're in our demos for the day. We've gotten through the intro and we get to our lunge station. Can anybody give me a nice quality setup, execution, and returning to neutral from our lunge position?
So you're going to stand with your feet right underneath your hips, step back, create 9 degrees in both knees, push through your front heel to get back to that standing tall position.
Knocked it out of the park. Exactly. Hip distance apart, and that's your neutral stance. And then, of course, that nice 90-degree bend, and then returning to neutral. Let's talk about some of the common mistakes here. I call this one walking a tightrope. That's when members like to bring their feet into one line. What's a good cue maybe for steering members away from that?
Railroad tracks.
Railroad, not a tightrope.
We love our railroad track analogy, exactly. So keeping those feet hip distance is going to help with balance, right? A lot of our less advanced members, maybe you see them wobbling side to side, their feet are aligned, hit those railroad tracks. Not bending the back knee. This one also goes along with the one after it, not big enough step back. Right? So either they're going to have a straight leg if they're taking too large of a step back in the back knee. You'll see that obtuse angle in their back knee. And then if they're not taking a big enough step back, you'll see the knee flexion angle is a little bit smaller, more of an acute angle. Then they're almost getting into like staggered squat territory. So those are just some good angles to watch out for. Again, like Mitch said in that intro, 90 degrees is what we're aiming for. Another one, knees crossing past the toes. This can be a lot to do with anatomy too. If somebody has a really long femur bone and they're going for those lunges, that knee maybe wants to creep forward. Sometimes I'll cue like a little bit more of a hip hinge there to push those hips back and bring the knee back over the ankle. And then of course, external and internal rotation. So being really mindful that not only do we have those railroad tracks, but also that we're not rotating the toes out, or especially not rotating the toes inwards there. Like we said, lots of variations for this movement, of course. The first one I have on here is intentional upper body placement. And this will also come into where the weight is placed. So right when we have that upright spine and taking those lunges, it's going to be a lot more quad dominant, working the top of the leg. And then if we do add that slight lean forward, that hinge, that's going to be activating more of the glutes, more of the hamstrings back of the leg. We'll also see that sort of show up in another variation you'll see up here, Bulgarian splits. That's another one where members like to target the glutes with that slight lean forward. Lateral lunges are going to get those synergist muscles, right? Glute medius, as well as those inner thigh muscles. You'll get a nice stretch in the inner thigh too. I like to talk about mobility with my lateral lunges a lot. Going even really lightweight can be super helpful for those. Of course, we have the staggered squats or the pistol squats. We're going to see a lot of those variations even next week, right? Kicking off our series, we'll see some pistol squats. And we'll see a lot of unilateral movements, especially in the base phase, because we have Lone Star on Tuesdays. So that's going to be super helpful. We'll talk about that as well in upper body, right, for checking out any of those imbalances, but same thing with the legs. I also threw plyo lunges on here because even though we're talking about weight training, that explosive energy is really helpful. And that's also a lot of where that functionality comes from in our classes, right? If you see something, maybe you're at home, like you have a vase that's fallen off the countertop, you're going to lunge to grab it. Having those nice fast twitch muscles is super important as well. Curtsy lunges on here too. This one, I see a lot of members struggle with foot placement, knee placement. Would anyone be willing to cue me through a curtsy lunge demo?
So you step out, you trace a C pattern in the floor, and you're ending with that knee behind that opposite heel. So you're not stepping out too wide. and a hyperextension, and it's just enough space for you to activate as you're coming out of that curtsy.
But yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned that C on the floor. That's a great visual cue for people. And then that knee right behind the heel. Sometimes you see people do that really deep cross, and then you'll see their hips start to twist and they get into all these funky shapes. But yeah, I like to really drill home that shoulders and hips are sort of headlights to the front of the room. And then you just get that action in the outer glute by exactly what you said, C curve in that leg. Well done, thank you. And then we talk about weight. You can even start body weight with people, especially some less advanced members, while they figure out the balance of that lunge. And then go ahead and go up one weight class at a time until they've reached that place where they feel pushed slightly outside of their comfort zone, I always say. And of course, pay attention to where the weight is. So this also comes back to intentional upper body placement. We'll see some front rack variations. Anytime the dumbbells are up, generally people will want to keep the torso a lot more proud, a lot more upright to avoid, any tension in the lower back. So that's going to be your quad dominant lunges. You can think of it similar to our front rack squats. If we have more of a suitcase hold, whether we're using kettlebells or dumbbells, that suitcase hold allows for the possibility of a slight lean forward for that hamstring and glute dominant lunge. Any cues people like for lunges that you want to throw out?
I like to tell people to lean forward more if they want a little bit more of that hamstring and glute engagement. And if they want that quad engagement, I'll tell them to keep their steps short and to keep their chest nice and upright.
Totally, exactly. And I love that it's tailoring to people's goals. That's what we want to do, right? Let's talk about overhead press, shall we? Okay, so this is a push movement, overhead push. How about main muscle movers?
Shoulders. Yeah.
Thank you, Riley. Yes, deltoids, mostly front and middle. And then synergists, quite a few synergists could be considered for this one.
I tend to feel some of this in the lats. Anytime I'm bringing something down, I'm really engaging those lats.
Absolutely, which is great coming off our pull-up series. What else we got?
Traps too.
Yeah, traps are going to stabilize for sure. Triceps could also be considered maybe even a main mover or a synergist. You've got that full extension of the elbow.
Did we say delts?
Delts. Go, yeah, exactly. And then shoulder girdle, all of those, stabilizers in there. Serratus anterior goes along with the lats, a lot of the stabilization of the torso. All right, who wants to give me our 10 or 15 second intro for this movement if we're on the floor giving demos here?
So you're starting by squatting and picking up that barbell and setting it on that collar, making sure your elbows are propped towards the front of the room. Looseness in those fingers so you're not death gripping the bar. You start to raise, guide your ears into where those biceps are, and then pop your head through the window at the top for that strict press. With the exhale from your mouth, you start inhaling on the way back down and setting it on the collar.
Lindsay, awesome. Thank you so much for the participation.
You're
All
welcome.
right, yeah, that's exactly right. So let's pull up those cues. Exactly, feet hip distance apart, clean the bar to that front rack position. I like that you mentioned elbows are up, just the same as we do in our front squat, right? Finding that same position every time. This is a push press variation I've written out here, but obviously, using the bend in the knees to generate power. For strict press, we're not doing that as much. And then returning the bar to the shoulders. And I love this video. And he's just going right back to that front rack perfectly every time. Like he's even setting it down, getting complete disengagement of the deltoids. That's really awesome. Common mistakes here we might see one arm moving faster, stronger. Y'all ever see that? And the barbell goes up, it's a little crooked, and then it gets flat at the top. So again, coming back to our Lone Star days, that is going to be the time that we get on them about correcting that now, so that when they get to peak, we're not seeing any crooked bars. Squatting in the push press. I see members all the time. They'll just bend all the way down into a nice low squat, and then they're doing basically thrusters instead of the push press. Too much energy wasted in the lower body when that's not the focus for that. Too wide, too narrow of a grip. So just being mindful where that hand placement is. We want to see that shoulder width apart, maybe slightly wider than that for that good delt engagement. And then I wrote rushing reps, which we could see really in any movement, but just making sure that we have that controlled descent is super important. Anyone would want to throw out a cue that could correct one of these common mistakes, something that is really helpful that you find works for your members, or other common mistakes?
For the hand placement, it's often their hands are not even. So I just tell them to place their hands just outside their shoulders, and that usually fixes it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, even on the bar, right? Because if they're shifted over on one side closer to that plate, that can be another reason why they're tipping. That's a great one, Mitch.
I don't know about you guys, but oops, sorry. No, you go. Absolutely.
I also noticed that a lot of people arch their lower back and then flare their rib cage. So I always remind everybody kind of tuck their glutes under them and draw that rib cage back in.
Yeah. With that, also, people will press too far in front.
Yep.
So a good way to remind them where their finishing position, bicep should end up by your ears.
Yes. All beautiful things. And exactly. And I love what Lindsay said also about like putting your head through, right? And that'll put you in that perfect position. Love it. So variations, we could go through a million of them, but here's just a few I put out. We've got the strict press and the push press. Of course, those are going to be the two main ones. The unilateral press we're going to see during Lone Star. Also during Lone Star, we're going to see some kneeling landmines. Those are going to be really helpful. That is actually a little bit more of that frontal plane, sagittal plane, I guess. And so they are going to get a little bit more of the front delts engaged there for that option, as well as core stability, right? We talked about core, that lateral side. And then I also have seated kneeling / Z press. When we're seated, we recently just saw where we're sitting on the agility box shoulder press, right? No back support. Maybe that'll require a little bit more core there as well. But if you are using the bench and you've got that back support, then you're really isolating the shoulder. So that's a really good one to focus on during the base phase, especially. And then the Z press and the kneeling press are going to be a lot more of the stabilizers. So in the Z press, when you're seated on the floor, legs are in front of you. Members might find a little hip flexor engagement here too, so they could bend their knees to alleviate some of that. And then of course, the kneeling press is maybe one of the most functional variations because you've got the whole core complex, the glute complex, right? We just talked about the sway in the lower back. So that's going to help correct that a little bit. Pushing those hips. Sometimes I'll cue just a tiny little tuck in their pelvis on that movement for people who have that interior pelvic tilt. And then of course, front raise, lateral raise, getting those shoulders. What weight should they use? Start light, I always say, and build up, especially for strict press. And don't be afraid of the 2.5 plates. A lot of people feel like, I don't need to put those out today. But especially for a movement, like an upper body movement, like the overhead press, adding that tiny bit of weight is going to, number one, help members improve and get just that little bit stronger. And number two, it's going to be really encouraging because they see themselves lifting that heavier weight, even if they can't make the jump by another 5 pounds on each side. So we'll have our base to peak focus there. Make sure that they're tracking reps and weights as they're going. Again, tailor this to their goals. What are the SMART goals they can be putting out there? Specific, measurable, achievable, time-based, and R is, someone help me with R. Thank you. Realistic, yes. So we're discussing proper form. Base is the time to get the form down. We don't want to see any bad form in build or peak or base, but this is the time to knock bad habits out of people's system. That also comes with range of motion. No half reps, right? Unless it's designed that way. Really getting the full extension of the muscle and contraction of the muscle for every movement and throwing in all of those good things like tempo. Identifying the variations like we did today, the complementary movements, and then starting with volume over weight. That's sort of the idea for our base and build phase, is that volume, and then weight comes through, especially in the peak phase. Beautiful. And then I have a little screenshot here that'll show you what it might look like in the app for the tracking section. Of course, they can put the weight, it's per dumbbell, so you only need to choose one. And then how many reps they're getting, if they're modifying, any notes they want to put, stuff like that. So this is the one from trials. So the series assessment one will look slightly different, but make sure that your members know where this is in the app, in the tracking section, so that you can best prepare them for that assessment. Well, I'm super excited for this series and these two movements. I feel like they're very complementary of each other, really, at the end of the day. If anything does come up, of course, you know who to reach out to. We are here for you. Otherwise, I hope you'll have a great Thursday, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you, Joey. That was so helpful.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thanks for all your. See ya, fam.